For loops are structures that enable you to run repetitive code until a specific condition is met. This is also called a repetition control structure. Let's see how we can define a for loop and how it works. We have our main method inside our application class. A for loop can be started by writing the keyword for and opening two parentheses. Here inside the parentheses, we need to specify three things. First one is a simple counter that will keep track of the times this loop is going to run. For this, a simple integer variable is sufficient. Let's say int I equals 0. Second one is a condition that can stop the loop. More precisely, if this condition is met, then the loop will stop running. We will say I is less than 5. Notice that you can use the previously defined counter in your condition. Third element that you need to specify here is the action that can be run as the loop progresses. Here I'm going to specify I++. Notice how I used the post increment operator that we learned about during our lecture about operators. Basically, after each loop iteration, the I variable is going to be incremented with 1. Without this, the loop will run indefinitely, and it will create an infinite loop situation, because the condition of I being less than 5 cannot be met. Next, we open some curly brackets and define what code we should run as part of our loop. I'm going to print the content of the I variable, so let's say system.out.println, the variable is, and let's add the I variable and close the parentheses. Let's run this loop and see what we get. As you may expect, we can see the variable has run 5 times, printing each time the content of the variable. This is expected since the condition was that I should be less than 5, and when it reached the value 5, the loop has stopped executing. Another common scenario for using for loops is to traverse arrays. Let's define a new array here with 3 different integers. Now let's start a new for loop and recap its structure a bit. Now, the first element is the counter, which will keep track of the element that we are currently pointing at in the array. Note that arrays always start with 0, so we are going to define a new int that is equal to 0. Now we need to define an exit condition in order to stop the loop. We know our array has 3 elements, but what should we do if we do not know the number of elements inside our array? We can use a property of arrays in Java called length, which will return the integer that corresponds to the size of that array. So we are going to specify I is less than r.length. Next, we are going to increment our I variable with 1 each time the loop runs. Inside, we are going to say system.out.println r of I. Let's run this code. We can see each time the loop runs, it outputs the corresponding number from inside the array. Another capability of the for loops is to define inner loops. So you can define a for loop inside another loop. Let's do that quickly. And now let's run the code. You can see that each time the first for loop runs, the inner loop will run until its condition is met. Then the main loop runs again, triggering the inner loop again. And this happens until the condition from the initial loop is met. That's it for the moment about for loops. This is an important topic, so I would advise to download the attached code and play a bit with it. You can try to define a loop to traverse an array from the last element to the first, just to get a grasp on the concept. We are going to use for loops throughout the rest of the tutorial, so make sure you fully understand what the for loop is about. In our next lecture, we are going to approach another type of loop called the while loop, so see you in the next video.